So here's something that I've done with my drill press that, well, mostly it just makes it easy to manufacture a lot of different parts exactly the same way, particularly parts that have holes in them. You can see what I've done is fixed my drill press between two homemade, I guess I'd call those cabinets, really crude cabinets. That particular cabinet there, I keep a bunch of fixtures and jigs, just devices to make it easy to measure things. And you can see what we have is this leaf, which I can move up to the top so that it's even with the tops of those two homemade shelves. And of course that puts it closer to the drill head so that the drill bit will reach whatever I put on that shelf. Now it's very imperative that everything be very well fixed. You don't want anything wiggling and jiggling and moving around on you, at least from the perspective of the drill bit in reference to the table. So both the drill and the table have to be fixed in place well. Now, what I do is I use this homemade fence, and as you can see, it's nothing fancy. It's just a 2x2 with a dowel rod, and the key is that we can position the fence in relation to the drill bit. It all pivots on that dowel rod over there, and all we have to do is put a clamp on it on this end, and that will then, of course, give us a reference that is a fixed distance from the drill bit. Thus, we slide things along that fence and drill holes. They'll all be on exactly the same line, and that's really what I want to demonstrate for you here. And what I'll do is I'll use a part that I actually manufacture for my BlueSkyKitchen.com business. What I have is a situation where I want my customer to be able to adjust shelf and drawer heights in 1-inch increments, because there's different kinds of gear associated with camping, and one person might want a shelf to be at a certain height while somebody else might want that height to be a little more or a little less. So what I've done is come up with a design that allows them to be able to adjust the height based on their equipment. So as I do this, you can kind of get the feel for how this thing works. It's really a very, very simple type notion. In this particular case, though, for this particular part, the depth of that hole is that we're drilling is going to be kind of important. It's really designed to use those little 1/4-inch fluted dowels. So I've set the depth of the hole based on how much of that dowel will stick out. And as you can see, I also have what amounts to a jig that has all the holes in it. And it is going to essentially measure all those holes for me. I don't have to use a tape measure because my jig will put the hole in exactly the right spot for me. As you can see, I need to get that fence situated in exactly the right spot to make sure that it's going to drill through what amounts to a plywood piece and a what I call a bone material, which in my case is a redwood piece. It's a 2x piece of redwood. And here we go. You can see again, it's pretty obvious once you see how this thing works. But notice how long this takes. It's you can drill a whole bunch of holes very quickly with this. And I would point out that there are 2 ends on this boxes, so you have to do this for 2 different ends. and therefore it's something you got to be able to do fairly quickly. This is a mass production kind of a notion at work here. Now I've sped the video up here to 5 times, but you see what happens is in a very short period of time, we have a whole bunch of holes. They're all located on a specific line that was determined by the position of that fence and the jig. I like to take a little sandpaper and just smooth off all the roughness that might have been created with my drill bit and what have you. And again, you see we have that they're all 1 inch apart because that's how they are on the jig. And they're all on a straight line right along the edge of that piece, and there you have a nice looking piece. And not surprisingly, it doesn't take much imagination to see that you could actually use this sort of an arrangement in several different ways to acquire different sort of situations where you might need a whole lot of holes in a whole lot of pieces. Once you get your fence set and once you get your jigs set, you can very, very quickly produce what really amounts to identical hole patterns on as many pieces as you want to. Of course, in mass production situations, this is critical, or else you spend all your time drilling holes and don't make any money. So that's why I come up with these sorts of things. And you can see what's happening here is really you just have a couple stops on that jig that's bolted up, that fixture that's bolted up to the leaf, and that gives us the ability to locate, in this case, these 2 1/4 inch holes at a specific distance from not only the edge but also the ends. Now, I would also point out that the way I do this is I set the depth on these things so that it just barely protrudes through the other side, rather than drilling all the way through the hole. And what I find is, because this redwood tends to blow out when you drill all the way through, is if we set everything so that just the tip on our little Forstner or Brad bit, which I use Forstners and Brad point bits because they drill much cleaner holes. But if we set this up so that just the little tip comes through, then what you end up doing is making it so that you can just flip the piece over and make a much cleaner cut from the other side, as I'll show you here in this example. And by the way, you got to keep all your shavings away from the stops, because otherwise they will change the dimension or the location of the hole. So if we take this and flip it over, there's actually a tiny little hole there that just came through from the other side, and all we have to do is just punch out that little bit that's left to be drilled, and you have a really nice clean hole. And again, you always want to keep your shavings cleaned up really good, or else they basically alter the dimension because you're not actually going all the way up against the stop. The shavings start to get in the way, and that's how you can get in trouble with these kind of things. If a guy wanted to locate a bunch of holes on a specific radius, you can see how easy that would be to do. Because you have a leaf that you can drill a hole in, all you really have to do is figure out what you want your radius to be, and then drill a hole that your round stock is going to pivot on. Now, this little round thing I made for you last time when I was demonstrating how to cut a circle on a table saw. You might want to watch that video if you haven't already. But this might be a case where perhaps you made this circle and you also want to put some dowels in it, a fixed location. I have marked it out so we can drill 8 holes here in this thing. And you see what happens is now they're going to be located at exactly the same radius. And I marked, exactly where we want the holes. There's going to be 8 of them. This, by the way, is sped up by a factor of 5. But very quickly, we end up with a piece that has essentially 8 holes that are almost exactly the same distance from the center. And it's all because we have a device that allows us to mount jigs, fixtures, and drill holes.